Welcome to the program, and I'm your host, Greg Fenton. Joining me as co-host today is Laura Tarcea. Each week, we explore topics and ideas related to the experience of people with conflict and look to promote the profession of conflict resolvers. We are available to connect with at fentonmediation@gmail.com and 647-227-4734. Check out the Facebook page for Mediation Station and the group page also to ask to become a member. Also visit the YouTube channel Fenton Mediation and you can see past shows as videos. Also, when you go there, I would encourage you to click to like and also subscribe. That'd be helpful. Appreciate it too. Also visit the Mediation Station playlist on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. Please follow us at our Twitter account at Fenton Mediation. The conversation today is called Relationships. Should we trust our gut? And as I said, Laura Tarcea is going to be making her grand entrance in a moment. So the program is live each Sunday night from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We will engage in conversation with everyone attending, able to listen and watch the conversation. Microphones and webcams will be closed. And if anyone wants to contribute anything, there are two options. One is to see the chat icon as a bubble at the bottom center of your screen for you to click to then type in a comment or question and click to send. Thank you very much, Laura, for displaying that. Or you can click on the reactions icon that is also on the bottom center of your screen. Then click on the hand icon within for us to see that. Raising your hand, there's nice hand there, Laura, thank you. And we'll see that you want to speak, and we will open your microphone only for you to share your comment or question, and then we will close your microphone once again. The show is being recorded for both video and audio purposes. That will be uploaded for public access on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts at some later date. So today we're going to talk about relationships. Should we listen to our gut? Hi, Laura.
Good evening, Greg.
Yes, good evening. Or depending on what time zone you're in.
And good evening, everyone. It's not that we're not alone, which it's important to know, especially for those who are just seeing the two of us. We're not alone. So good evening to you, Greg, and everybody else who's listening in tonight.
I thought when you said we're not alone, it's like, those people from outer space. We're not alone. They talk about.
Well, I'm sure we're not alone in that context as well.
You think they're tuning in tonight to check this out?
I doubt it, Greg. My gut tells me they probably don't.
Your gut. Oh, don't listen to your gut. Let's end the show already. We got to the point. Well, got to go somewhere. I have wishful thinking. I was thinking going global, and that's even more universal. Anyways, how you been, Laura?
Amazing.
Amazing. Can you give me a little bit more descriptive with that?
I've been really well. I've been extremely busy. I'm trying to navigate just life, pandemic, life in the pandemic, physical health, mental health, relationships, and also care for myself in the midst of all of that. So it's a loaded question. It's a loaded answer. I don't think we have enough time during the show to really answer you how I feel, but in a nutshell, let's go with amazing.
All right, we'll leave it at that.
Leave it at that. Thank you.
Even though I'm quite suspicious that there's much more to that.
That's your nature. It's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. What's with all your recent travels, though? Is that part and parcel related to your amazing aspect?
My amazing aspect. So yeah. I think it has to be related with my finding the amazing aspect, because I every single year pre-COVID, I have been taking time off on my own And I've been dedicating time off to myself, really by myself, just traveling wherever I could honestly go online and find a inexpensive ticket and just fly there, rent a car, usually North America, and then make sure I have a Wi-Fi, a Starbucks, and a hotel. So I have three elements that are always sort of consistent throughout my traveling. I missed that a lot because that really was my way of connecting with myself, of reconnecting with myself, of reconnecting with whom I am when I am just me, right? Without having to be distracted or taking my energy, taking or we're actually, yeah, distracted by others' needs, by others' presence, which I'm not saying it's a negative thing, but it is a distraction nonetheless from me being me, right? So I've had an itch. So every year I get an itch, and I have to scratch it with making sure I get in a car and go for a long drive, and that's what you're seeing. I'm assuming you're speaking about trolling my Facebook account. That's that, because I know I haven't spoken to you about all of my travels, but you've
Well,
seen some of the photos that I've shared. Yes.
trolling is a bit of a strong word, maybe.
Is it?
I mean, you're a big user of social media. Maybe
Yes.
you like the attention.
Maybe. Oh wait. Well, I'll think about that. I'll think about that. I actually don't like the attention, but then there must be a reason why I'm posting that.
Yes, that's what
So
I would
so
think.
maybe, yeah. Maybe I do like the attention.
Yeah. So that'll be a topic for another show.
Yeah, or if we can turn this into a therapy session, then this could be sort of our assessment.
Sure.
Or-
And I just welcome anyone in the audience. If you also were curious about something about Laura, you could send a chat or ask a question or make a comment. Yeah. So tonight, we're focusing on the gut.
Mm.
And what is it about your gut that you feel, and that's in quotes, others would be interested to hear about?
Oi. Uh, what they'll be interested to hear about. It's restless. It's a restless gut. It is consistently trying to nurture, to understand, to talk, to find its voice, and uh, um, to become unfiltered in a way. So that's what I think, what I'm realizing, and what others probably would not know about the gut. And I know this gut conversation could be I'm not sure, some would look at it as a just a um, airy fairy type of thing, but I really do believe that without understanding, and when I'm talking about the gut, I'm not really referring to the intestine, although it is related in terms of the emotional health. It's associated with intestinal health, digestive health, but I'm not really talking about the digestive health. I'm talking about the emotional health, and I'm talking about how we connect with ourselves in order for our emotional health to thrive. And in order for me to thrive, in order for me to not feel that I'm inhibiting or filtering or putting myself down, or locking myself, my thoughts and my emotions into, essentially a bottle that is going to explode one way or another in a different context or another, right? So that's, in a very long-winded way, that is the gut that I'm speaking of. It's the emotions, it's the thoughts, it's connecting with oneself. And it's only from my experience. So, what I speak with my gut and what I try to do to my gut may not be transplantable to other guts. I think those two worked really well together.
Which, the transplanting and the gut?
The transplanting, yes, wording, yes.
Yeah. That's an interesting idea. Thought it provokes a lot of thoughts in my head.
Does
I
it?
I envision, I don't know, about transplanting a gut.
Yeah.
I got to work on that. Let me reflect on that for a few further you know, opportunity to share with you. What would you say is the societal perspective when we say the word gut? What is the broader?
The broader, the view.
Yeah.
Um, so the view from this, the way that I see the view. So you know how we talk about communication all the time. So we talk about, you know, respond, not react, right? I mean, that's one of the teachings in, you know, in how to communicate with others, how to negotiate, how to mediate, how to sort of. I think about how society views the gut is kind of like this primitive thing that is not meant to be um, um, it's not meant to be at the forefront of decision making. It's not meant to be at the forefront of reactions, of responses. It's really meant to be controlled, inhibited. The usual sort of, or talk before you open your mouth. Control yourself. Control your emotions, right? I mean, this is what we've been taught ever since we grow, really, right? I mean, from any type of a social interaction circle and context, we're taught to control, to filter, right? So those are the filters. So I when I look at when I think about the view of the society, I think about filters, and I think about the person sort of becoming less and less, well, becoming actually more and more silenced, the gut becoming more silenced, and sort of we become all one type of thing, right? It's a view that we're supposed to be a certain way, and we're supposed to control certain emotions that are deemed to be negative, or they are deemed to be just too extreme, or labeled as neurotic or all that stuff, and that we're supposed to sort of tuck them in under, and then just be just like everybody else, which is inhibiting all of that stuff. So that's when I think of how society looks at it, I view it as a controlling sort of feel.
What about, those mediations that you're doing, and there's like people in the room and they don't want the feelings in the room. They don't want to have the reactions, the gut. Take that out. Let's just deal with facts. Let's just deal with concretes.
And I hear that often. I hear that often, and we hear that often. And as much as we want to believe that we can put emotions aside, we cannot. That's 100% fact that we cannot put emotions aside. Emotions have to be allowed to be part of the fabric of negotiation. I'm not saying extreme emotions, because we've had families and individuals who got up and started hitting their heads to the wall. That would be very difficult to have a conversation with the wall and the head hitting the wall. But I'm talking about emotions such as deep fears, concerns, of unknowns, of how they feel in the moment when they hear a particular topic, when we are discussing a particular aspect of their future, of their co-parenting relationship, all that stuff. They're supposed to let those feelings come out, because without understanding those feelings, without understanding what they really fear about certain aspects, then we cannot make a decision that is going to last the test of time, because sooner or later those emotions are going to catch up. If they're not being displayed or expressed in that forum where the decision is about to be made, it's going to come out in a different forum, a year from now, 6 years from now, whatever, in a different way, right? Still causing a negative sort of feel and emotion to that particular aspect. Like, bottom line is, whenever I hear that, I think of, I did have a quote here, because it was just a quick one that I think it still stands true today, from I think it is Cicero, I believe I pronounce it Cicero. So I'll tell you how I love this quote a lot. It does refer to the decision making. So It says, for men decide far more problems by hate or love or lust or rage or sorrow or joy or hope or fear or illusion or some other inward emotion than by reality or authority or any legal standard or judicial precedent or statute. This is true today. People will make decisions based on emotions. If we don't know our own emotions, and if we are not taught to understand other people's emotions, and if we are actually taught to tell other people to control their emotions, we are failing at negotiating. We are failing at supporting an actual negotiation that is going to last the test of time.
Well, how rational is that, though? If you want to go away from, quote, just tell me what it is, tell me all the facts, tell me all the points. If you're going to combine the negotiation, the storytelling, let's just say, with emotions, how can you manage a space and a process that I would sense from emotions would be unpredictable?
But how are emotions irrational? Why are we told to think that, you know, it's either rational or it's emotional? Why aren't emotions rational? Some emotions are rational. We're all products of, you know, of experiences that are associated directly with emotional responses at a particular stage in time and a particular event. So how is that not rational? Or why do we put them in distinct categories? Because I see them as one and the same. And unpredictability is okay. I think you have to expect unpredictability, because if you don't expect that unpredictability, you are exactly doing the, you know, the societal sort of control inhibiting sort of process, which then what's the point? What's the point of trying to even come to a negotiation or to a decision making that is going to alleviate some of the concerns? Then you might as well, you know, have sort of like a robotic, automatic um, term or clause that applies to everybody, and you pretty much tell everybody go live by this, right? So we can have one separation agreement with one parenting plan and we're just changing the names and we send it to everybody, because that's what it would be if we don't take into account the emotional association of each aspect of their lives. And I understand that they are unpredictable. I understand they can be disruptive, but without disruption, we cannot make a change. In fact, it has to be disruptive, because if it's not disruptive, we cannot actually start to learn a new pattern of co-parenting, of understanding one another. Because we have been in a pattern, for example, a family has been in a pattern of dysfunctional communication. So if we're not addressing that dysfunctional communication, so it's therefore, if it's not disrupted at this point in time, or at least start to, then we cannot switch the pattern. We cannot even begin to understand how we can shift the pattern in order for these parents to become at least healthy co-parents. I'm not saying best friends. I'm not saying they're fall in love with each other. I'm not saying anything like that, but at least to shift in order to create a co-parenting healthier pattern that is going to be, again, lasting the test of time. So for me, emotions are to be expected. Unpredictability has to be expected. And disruption, it's a given.
Well, I mean, it's where it is because of what happened in the past, and where it will go depends on where people connect with their moments of time at when they're, let's just say, in mediation and they have to come together and make decisions. Uh, aren't we talking about lived experiences of people, how they've been affected, whether it's positive or negative or harmful or productive? And that can be very unpredictable, as you say. And it's rife in the area of feelings, affect, where people have been through something, the struggles, the challenges, and then they come together in somewhat a process of some form with somebody who's there to facilitate it. does that facilitator impose their construct of the process on the people, or does it provide the space for the people to really create their own template of the process?
Well, I'm going to go back to Dana's words, answering questions to you in one of the past shows. Depends. So the answer to your question is depends, because if you it's very difficult not to bring your own biases and your own sort of vernacular at the table. It's very difficult. So you ought to be in check. And I'm not saying just in mediation, but I'm saying in any type of relationship, any type of conversation, any type of discussion, any type of negotiation with your children, with your friend, with your husband, your wife, whatever. That it's very difficult not to bring your biases, in at the table. However, there are some mediators out there whom really actually scare me, who make a point of bringing their lens and imposing their lens at the table. So you know how to distinguish those. It's when somebody tells you, a stranger whom you met for, I don't know, 3 hours, an hour of an assessment, an hour of talking to you about something. So let's call it 3 or 4 hours. Make it generous, 5 hours. And they tell you words like, you should be doing this, you should be paying this support, you should not see the children, you should see the children, you should have them for this time, you should not have them for this time. These words, the way that they're delivered, it's not them, it's not the family, it is the lens of this stranger essentially imposed on, right, or told on this family. So it is very difficult to it's easy to see them, but it's still very difficult even for those ones who make a concerted effort not to bring those at the table, those biases at the table, because they are sometimes, we find ourselves in situations where morally, for example, or ethically, we are not aligned with one of those people at the table, or both of the people at the table. So there's a couple of options, in those respects. One option is to try and understand and really remove yourself, remove your own, unless of course it's, gross abuse, or I'm not talking about that. Remove your values from the table and allow for understanding at least for some of their values. And another way is to really, if one person is very difficult to deal with and has really triggered the mediator, you can still keep the person at the table for sort of what I like to call the greater good. You kind of want to keep that person at the table for the other person. You see what I mean? So I'll give you an example. We had a family who, one of the parents was did something pretty bad, went to jail, came out of jail, and now there was a next chapter to resolve some of the family situations. So mom was okay to do mediation. Mom's lawyer was not okay to do mediation. But
what was your understanding of why?
Because they wanted to, they were calling it, probably that it's re-abusing, re-engaging, re-victimizing, all of the great words that we hear in some of this contexts. However, mom begged us to do mediation because she no longer could stand having anything public record into the family courts. She no longer could face him. She no longer could face his lawyer, things like that. And mediation was the only forum for her where we could do shuttle mediation. So she doesn't see him, she doesn't hear him.
Mhm.
And we can also assess and continue to assess for this elements of and address the elements of power imbalance and domestic violence. So those were addressed, and that was resolved in the end. However, it was a very difficult one for all of us at the table, for mediators inclusive, right? Because it was very tough not to bring some of the biases at the table and still maintain a sense of dignity for everybody involved, including the parent who went in and out of jail, right? Because otherwise, without maintaining that sense of dignity, we would have lost the parent from the table. They would have gone through a very lengthy sort of legal proceeding, and the children would have suffered even more at having to endure to read even more stuff, right?
Let alone the two parents, because
Well,
their co-parenting relationship would have been marginalized for sure.
very much so. But see, we have families who say, well, I have to go to court because there's domestic violence or there's a power imbalance. That's what my lawyer told me. But they're forgetting to understand, or we don't have a good understanding of the fact that the only forum where domestic violence and power imbalances are assessed is in mediation. Your lawyer does not assess for power imbalances and domestic violence, does not manage or address those factors or those elements. The court is not trained to do that either. The only way that these are actually acknowledged and assessed for, it would be through mediation, whether mediation, arbitration, or mediation, but through that forum rather than connecting with a lawyer and directly and going into the system, right? So, but that's a very different type of topic. So I will not, I'm not going to go there.
Wouldn't it be a profound shift if lawyers got training in law school on assessing and screening for domestic violence, coercive control, intimate partner violence as part of their mandate of education, their skill set, their competencies?
Very much so. And also, in addition to that, to work with mediators, to work in a collaborative fashion. Because when those elements are present, then the best thing to do for a family is to find a way to alleviate, not to escalate, right? And then we know that really, as court will escalate, going to court will escalate anything that is an element of abuse or power imbalance. So that to me is critical, and I think we still have a very long way to go, but we're moving in that direction.
So we had an original title of
Yes.
should we listen to our gut? And then we had a whole bunch of variables as well. Then you wanted to include relationships. What is it about relationships that you wanted to have in context of the guts, and should we listen to that?
So when I suggested a topic initially, I thought it's a given. I thought it's a given. You have to listen to your gut. You have to follow your gut, and I told you that. And then you kind of challenged me on it, and I hung up, and I never wanted to speak it with you again. But that's my gut told me within 5 minutes to just
So
put it to rest. Put it to rest.
You just reacted on that, and you didn't take that pause and respond.
I reacted, okay. Yes. It is important. I think part of why I have inserted. So after I did a quick travel, I went for a very long drive, and I started thinking about following the gut again and listening to your gut. And perhaps you were right in challenging me. I say perhaps, please, that's the key word.
Yeah, well, it's a slight consideration. Well, I see your openness.
I am open to perhaps you being correct in challenging me there, because we may not be able to listen to our gut. However, I think you can be it's in relationships. And relationships don't have to necessarily be relationships with external, so they don't have to be a relationship with someone else, but it could be relationships with a relationship with you, with yourself, your own self relationship, your own way of internalizing the way that you talk to yourself, your inner dialogues, monologues, whatever it is, your voices, your emotions, your thoughts, all of that stuff. How do you relate to them? What's your relationship with them, right? So in that sense, I started thinking about whether we can or we cannot, follow our guts. A few years back, I'll give you, a little anecdote or story. So a few years back, well, actually many years back, I was in a marriage, in my first marriage, and thinking back, and this is how I grew up. I grew up in a country where we wore uniforms. We went through communist regime a little bit. Then we went through a revolution. Still, nonetheless, there were this sort of consistent elements of making sure that you control yourself, you control your emotions, you limit what you say, when you say, blah blah. So everything was normalized in that way. When I got married, when my husband used to tell me, my ex-husband at that time used to tell me, well, he's still ex-husband today, not at that time. So my ex-husband used to tell me that you should. He had a very. It's hard to translate. Actually, it's not hard to translate from Romanian to English. So I think before you open your mouth. But it sounds more rude, actually. I think it sounds rude anyway, but it sounds more rude in Romanian. Maybe because it's my mother tongue, so that's why. Whenever he said that to me, I sort of went inwards even more. So I, from this sort of very opinionated child and high school and all that stuff, and now into a marriage, I sort of it became normalized for me that I should, keep my mouth shut. I should be, whatever, think before I speak. Whenever you would hear that, or one would hear that, there's a lot more, right? It's not just think about what you're saying. It's someone dumbing you down. It's someone, essentially telling you that whatever you're saying, and especially whenever you're saying right away, it's not so smart. It's not so good. It's not so positive, right? So it's diminishing. It's silencing you, and it's rude. So through all of that relationship, going back to the word relationship that we introduced in our gut, I have begun to feel very intimidated and less confident, and intimidated to talk to people, to express my views, my opinions, and that lasted for many years, including in school, including when I went back to school, including when I went into another relationship. I always and I had this internal sort of
mindset of that
a voice
control.
kept saying me, yes,
it controlled you, right?
it really does take a toll, and it does control you, and it does control the how you experience, how you allow yourself to experience a particular relationship, a communication, and all of those aspects of your life. So slowly but surely, and it wasn't actually, to be honest, even though the marriage ended about 20 years ago. So I'm talking about a while, right? It still permeated my every sort of day routine in terms of interacting with people, answering at school, all that stuff. And it's been only a few years ago where I realized during this long trips, really, during these drives away by myself and reconnecting, that I've had the opportunity and the time and the privilege, because I really do think it's a privilege, to sit with myself and really delve down and remind myself that I'm okay the way that I am, that I have thoughts that, if someone doesn't want to hear them, they don't have to listen to them, that I have a voice that, even though I may have an accent and I may have, certain words pronounced differently than others, it's not to be ashamed of. So I have learned just within myself, that I am permitted to be myself, and I have allowed myself to start to nourish or re-nourish my gut, because my gut always told me that didn't feel right. It didn't feel right the way that I was spoken to. It didn't feel right to be in that type of relationship. It didn't feel right. Nothing felt emotionally healthy. And yet I stayed in it because I was told that if you control all of these aspects of your emotions and your gut and all that stuff, I mean, therefore, that is your relationship that you ought to be in. And that's okay. And it didn't feel okay. So because I didn't listen, I feel now, as I stayed for, quite a bit longer than I should have. But without it, I would not have been into, pushed, I feel, in a way, to really start to reconnect with myself and really see where I'm at now, and have dedicated years actually now to myself nurturing my gut, which actually created some resistance from some of my friends, because I have also learned through nourishing the gut and nurturing my emotions and the way that I am, that, for example, I never used to say no. So saying no is a huge thing, because saying no, um there's lots of other stuff that come into play, like how we grew up religiously, how we grew up, there's guilt, there's shame, all that stuff, and you always want to please everybody and all that stuff, or at least some of us do anyway. So saying no is a huge thing. And now I notice that whenever I learn to say no, I got some resistance, I got some pushback, and I had to learn to be okay with the pushback. So I had to learn that I have recreated the connection with myself, where I'm okay to say no, and I'm okay to accept the resistance that I'm getting from the people in front of me, because that doesn't have anything to do with me. That just has to do with them, and that's okay. If that's how they feel, they're entitled to feel the way that they feel, and I'm entitled to feel that the way that I feel. However, when I couldn't nourish my gut, my entitlement was sort of like kind of hijacked by what they felt, what they needed. So I couldn't distinguish myself from their needs. So I was kind of like, in there, ambushed in there, kind of like enveloped in their needs, in their energy, without sort of, reminding myself that I am also here, right? So being here, sometimes disrupts things, and it's okay, right? So I'm learning to, this is sort of the what pushed me to continue to do this learning of self, and learning to be okay with being reactive, because I know, Greg, that we learn so much about communication, and we learn so much about breathe, count to 10, take a step back, control yourself, all of those stuff. I mean, there's the consistently being told to us and being pushed upon us. Respond, don't react. It's okay sometimes to react. It's okay sometimes to react, because it's, if you don't react in the moment, and I'm barring like really harmful stuff, if you don't react in the moment, sometimes especially when you are in a relationship, the other person may never understand the hurt, the joy, the excitement, I mean, it can be positive or negative, that you associate with a particular event or an experience. So therefore you take away an opportunity for them to learn about you as well, by blocking yourself, by taking that step back. I'm not saying shift completely and don't take a step back, because I do think you should breathe, count to 10. Sometimes it's very appropriate to do that, but sometimes it's okay to react, because sometimes that reaction, it's not going to be only beneficial to you because it's a relief, but then sometimes it's going to be of benefit to the person in front of you, because they get to know what triggers you, and they get to learn boundaries alongside with you.
There's a lot there, which I really appreciate you opening up and sharing. That there's a lot of stuff that could be yeah, poof, that's come to the surface, right? And I think that's, that's deep within you, internalized. And, as you've shared yourself, you've been better able to connect with yourself over the last few years. And that's where I really identify with self-empowerment, where you've self-empowered yourself. You've deeply connected within internally. You've reflected, you've you've taken more ownership of your own power within, rather than what I heard and understood, in the previous relationship where it was imposed on you and downloaded on you, then you had to fit into this box. I don't know if that was cultural or gender as part of that whole dynamic. At the same time, you were uncomfortable with that. And when you gravitated to the opportunity where you could reflect, better connect within, to see what was, what is, what isn't, and what could I possibly do, because I'm not happy with that other template. I need to get a change for me. And I think that's where you've empowered yourself. And now you can be, with these idioms, you can walk your talk and talk your walk. You can be true to yourself. And that's where you're more confident and you have ownership. Whereas before, again, too, you were compliant in some way, if you don't mind me using that term.
Mhm.
You were like feeding into the hands of someone else. Whereas now you're feeding out of your own hands. And it's so much more powerful and empowering for yourself to be able to do what you want to do, how you want to do it, ideally, and like be true to yourself.
Mhm.
So trusting your gut.
Trusting your gut. Yes. And I never thought that, see, I'm going to go back to what you said about rational. So I never thought that, a gut can be rational, right? So I always thought I associated gut with emotions and all that stuff. And because of the way that I grew up and the experiences and the teachings, I have learned to, yes, distinguish them, to say exactly that. Your gut is emotional and that's irrational, and it's just a fight or flight response, run, freeze, all of that stuff. And then you're rational, your brain is going to make the decisions. But then how does your brain learn, and from whom your brain learns, right? I mean, these are all concepts and constructs that have been placed in front of us to teach us to respond in a certain way. So as opposed to our own internal compass, our own internal mechanism of determining whether this is feels right, feels wrong, you should run, you should stay, all of that stuff should still be permitted to act and to be at the forefront and be given priority before you run and say, well, I should stay in this relationship or I should leave this relationship. Maybe first you take that step and ask yourself, how do you feel right now in this moment, with that person or in that relationship, or even with that person who can be you? How do you feel with yourself, right? Because we're taught a lot about communication with others. How do you communicate? How to talk to someone else? But we're not taught how to communicate with ourselves. We're not taught how to talk to ourselves, how to not bitch at ourselves all the time whenever we go wrong about something, whenever we fail, right? I mean, we're not taught to speak kindly to ourselves, but we are taught to speak kindly to others, right? I mean, or communicate well, or take that step, or whatever extra step. But where is that communication, that kindness, and that compassion of self, right? Where is that teaching? So there's really major aspects of learning to follow your gut. It really is learning to speak and communicate with your gut, and then learning to allow your gut to lead, because
Yeah.
your gut is you. Your emotional core is you. How you feel in a particular moment, it is valid, it is true. Nobody can judge how you feel in a particular moment. Nobody should judge how you feel in a particular moment, because despite similar contexts, similar wall colors, similar air that we breathe. We are a product of a very different and unique experiences. And the fact that we stay all in the same room does not mean that we all see the walls as white, does not mean that we all breathe smoothly the air that is through the air conditioning in that room. It doesn't mean that. And yet to take that and say it that way or label it that way, it's a disservice to the way that we should be permitted to be. We should be permitted to have those differences, to express those differences, and to celebrate those differences, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's
And
why I
challenge
really,
them.
yeah, that's why some of the things I say, I don't really believe. I say it just to be provocative in some sense, to question, because the words, even the words that we have created, are boxes into perspectives and understandings, and then people act on those understandings, and they just reinforce a lot of the challenges that we are experiencing. Maybe it's not to use the word react or respond,
Mm.
something more neutral, to express,
Mhm.
whether that's, reaction can be spontaneous in the moment
Right.
without necessarily thinking. So let's have a more open-ended type of term to communicate whatever we're feeling, to express, rather than, when I say the word react, you're going to have a certain reaction and response to that. When I say the word respond, yeah, perfect. We're going to have another one. So the words we use and the words we don't use box us in, and they limit the opportunity. And I want to mention from the crowd there, and this is to you, glad you listened to your gut and were able to recognize the need to make changes in your life for your own well-being and personal growth. So I talk about self-awareness. I talk about, okay, let's be selfish. And then people attach meaning to that. Why would you want to be selfish? It's all about you. Well, it starts with me or with oneself, though the intention is not to stay there. It's to then be an opportunity to bridge and transcend to another. So I don't want to walk amongst people as totally separated as an individual and never have a connection. I want to have relationships. I want to belong amongst people. And that's why I use the word amongst rather than between, because the between reinforces to me division, separation, isolation in some form. So the words we use can make a profound difference in how we process those, what we make sense of them, and what we do with them.
Mhm. And absolutely it's the words that you use with oneself and the words that you use with others that are very critical, and they should be open, because every single moment, every single experience will teach you to change, will change you. Every moment will change you. So if you're not open, or if you're not open-minded in terms of coming up with the words that you associate to a particular feel or emotion or reaction or response, then you are putting yourself in a box, and you are attaching meaning to a particular event or a particular emotion that may no longer be valid today because we have changed, right? So part of why I really do think it's important to be true to yourself and be true, and it's very difficult. I don't think this is an easy task at all. And I think you will work until the day you die to be true to yourself. And that's okay. And that's okay, because that's the way that I think, without growth, there is no living, right? So we have to grow in order to live a meaningful life. And that this is part of our meaningful life, I feel anyway. But without nurturing, without talking to yourself, without understanding yourself, and without understanding, why you react or act a particular way in a particular situation, because they may not all be pretty, right? I'm not saying that you will always act perfectly. I certainly don't. But I learn from my reactions because I sit with them. If I don't allow my reactions to come, forward. I don't learn about myself. So I sit with that reaction. If I feel a particular, way, then I sit with it and I talk to myself about like what happened there. But another thing that I really wanted to touch on is that if you don't nurture this gut, if you don't nurture yourself, really truly what I mean is you are inhibiting. The other side of the coin is that you are inhibiting, you are silencing your gut, you're silencing your inner voice, you're silencing your emotions, you're putting, you're tying them up in a knot. And it does have a medical physical impact, mental health and also physical health. Most of the in any anybody can Google it, but the silent killer is stress is called a silent killer, and it is a silent killer because we don't know, we can't really articulate how and at what point we inhibited we so much of ourselves, we bottled up so much that our cortisol levels were up, our everything was up, and created something physically unwell that builds over time. And most of these diseases, stress, anxiety, depression, are associated with the unwellness of your of your gut, of your system. So it has real consequences in our day-to-day living. It's not just talking about it. It's not just airy fairy stuff. That's why, I'm always worried about proposing and suggesting topics like that. And to be honest, Greg, I was worried for, a couple of years because I wanted to talk about this because this is something that I'm learning on a day-to-day basis. And I have become so happy about and so content with all this. It's not easy, but I'm happy.
And just for me to interject,
Mhm.
that's something I've always wanted for you to provoke to, for you to be, and I'll shift the wording, not to be true to yourself, because I see that as being finality, truer to yourself. And I see that as distinction because there's more truerness to get to. It's a never ending process.
It really is. It really is a never ending process, and it should be.
So how do you, you talked about follow your gut. And I would push back and say, why
Go
would
ahead.
why would you
Push
follow
back.
your gut? It's about taking ownership and leadership of your gut, taking that, having that connection with it, and then saying, okay, this is what I'm experiencing. This is what I'm feeling. This is what it's quote saying to me, how I process the sense of feeling from the gut, because ideally guts don't talk, though.
Yours doesn't.
Well,
Obviously.
when I'm hungry, it does. Then it really tells me something.
Here we go.
Yeah, no, it's how we are processing the sensations that we're having to then to put it into more concrete terms or concepts to then say, this is what's going on for me, and I'm happy or I'm not happy, or I want something else, or I want something different. And that's to take leadership of one's gut to then have that ownership to create. So how do you connect with your gut? That's really the essence of this. How does one connect with one's gut?
And I'm often accused of this, being unfiltered. One of the ways it's being unfiltered.
What do you mean by being unfiltered?
Unfiltering your gut. So unfilter the way that you react or respond in a particular situation. Unfilter, the way that you talk sometimes. I'm not saying being rude. I'm not saying, attack someone. I'm not saying all that stuff, but just really do say that I really don't like your shoes. Or, I really do think you should get a different color shirt. It doesn't match your eyes. I don't know. It's being able to, I'm not saying necessarily those kind of examples, but being able to say what you see when you see it in the moment. And that requires a safe space because of course, freedom of speech and all, but you can't go in a subway and start yelling, to everybody to change their shirt to red. But
Ideally, you could. It's just there will
ideally you
be
could. It would be a
repercussions
bit
possibly.
disruptive, yeah. So
Yeah.
you would follow a very large gut. But in a safe space, I think in a safe space, you should be able to say these things, to feel these things, to say how you feel about a particular thing that's happened to you, that is happening to you in the moment, and then follow that in terms of not only understanding it, but also allowing it to take priority. Don't inhibit it. Don't feel like you have to take it back. You know, oftentimes we have to do the walk of shame, or it's like apologize for what I've said. But sometimes, you know, you sometimes that's how you felt in the moments. And I think if it's a safe space, you don't have to walk it back, right? That was a moment, and that moment was built out of many experiences and many things that brought you to that moment. And sometimes you can be an ass, and you can apologize for, you know, being an ass. um
So when you say as long as it's a safe space, I mean, that's
I
a
think the
big
safe space
condition.
it's a huge condition, because, and this is, it goes back to what I said earlier. I think if you're not allowing yourself to react or to follow your gut in a moment in a relationship, you're not allowing the other person to start to understand who you are and how you feel in particular moments, or in how particular experiences affect you in the moment, if you limit your reactions to those emotions. So you are allowing that, you're creating your safe space. Some people will run away and some people will never come back, so that's no longer your safe space unless you really chase them and you kind of, you know, like have a different like room that
Well,
you
yeah,
lock
but
them in. But
going back though to your just a little earlier point, like what do you really care? Because this is about you and you being able to connect and pull out from inside of you your perspective.
yes,
And it's not about taking ownership for, quote, let's just say their reaction in running away.
right, right. I think I think you care about hurting people whom you love. So that has to also be at the, you know, one of the things that you know, when you train your gut, it's not about hurting anyone, it's not about being rudely unfiltered. It is really just about self. It's really about self-recognition about a certain event, or certain emotions that's associated with a certain event. So let it be, right? I mean, don't always step back, don't always count to 10. Say it. Sometimes you have to say it. Sometimes you have to, you know, get up and go, or sometimes you have to get up and hug someone. I mean, follow that. That's what I'm feeling, because if you don't follow that,
How about I
um,
say go with it
go
rather
with
than
it.
follow it? Because for me, follow is like there's something else leading, and you're not necessarily aligned or
It's
connected
you.
with it.
It's you
Yeah.
leading.
So go with the gut. That's how I'll push back at you a little bit in my
Yes,
way.
you've done a great job at pushing back. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the thing is that a lot of these same things are us again providing the space for other people to determine and define and impose on us. And if we have ownership of things like this takes risk though. To
Absolutely.
go into your gut,
Absolutely.
share with me and us what.
Well, risk is one of the scary components of it, but it should be also one of those things that, because it's almost like a surprise element, risk sort of comes with the unknown. Well, the unknown is the most one of the most consistent things that we know. We I mean, in this moment we only know what's happening in this moment. We don't know what's going to happen in the next moment or in the future. We don't have a crystal ball, although I bet some of us do. Not me, but some of us do. But we don't have that. We only know. So taking risk is a huge part of it. And that's what makes it scary. That's what makes it scary sometimes to connect with your gut, because your gut is going to tell you, get up and go, right? Like in my relationship, in my former relationship, it told me almost on a day-to-day basis, what are you doing here? Get up, go, leave. Why are you allowing a particular person or this person to speak to you this way? you're better than that. And I'm not saying better than that in terms of, you know, categorizing people and values and the way that they are, and brains and smarts, but you're better than being sort of pushed on, silenced, and denigrated, right? So you deserve dignity. Everybody deserves dignity and respect, right? So that's the bottom line. The bottom line is you have to, and if you don't feel those, and if your gut tells you that, then it's risky to get up and go, right? It's risky to say to the other person, I'm not comfortable, because of their reaction, right? So then you have to be sort of, in a way, prepping for the fact that you may have a reaction that you may not, you know, enjoy or feel comfortable with, but that's on them, that's not on you.
And I think it's even risky, like, to go into that space for ourselves, the deep depths of the unknowns is one thing. And then another risk is, what will it open up? What will it release?
It always opens something up. But then at that point, you just have to be curious with a no judgment, right? And let it open up. Because if you don't let it open up, it's going to unfold into something different. It's going to create something different. Either, you know, an illness, either a blow up in a, you know, completely unexpected way, in a completely unexpected, at a particular, you know, like an unexpected event. So it will come up differently. Nothing leaves your body. Everything registers in your body.
Well, how can people trust something like a gut, which is such an intangible thing? It's not concrete. It's not like a desk or filing cabinet, which has clear definition. There's something you can actually pick up and do, move with it. Your gut is so organic in many ways. It's not that tangible thing. How can you trust something that you can't actually feel? Well, in another context of feel, because we're talking about feeling, we can't like put our fingers on it per se, and yeah, like this, right? We're coming up to Halloween. It's spooky, man. Yeah. So how can we put, quote, a finger on something we actually can't really put a finger on?
Well, you can definitely put a finger on you know, on your head. This is it. You know, I mean, it's your mental well-being. It's the voice in your head, right? I mean, it's the same thing. If you know, usually, you know, what we see is that a physical illness gets more understanding than a mental illness, right? Because you cannot see it, but it does exist, right? It does permeate the fabric of that person's and that person's life. So I think it's the trust factor, right? I mean, you have to trust that it exists, and you have to trust that it speaks a different language for everyone. And you
Well,
have to be.
it even goes back to domestic violence. I had the show, and the author, Helen, and she wrote a couple of books, and she went to the court, and I met her, and she went to see the advice councils, and they said, where are your bruises? Because she was talking about the power and control, the abuse in the relationship. Where are your broken bones or your bruises? And so that was the essence of the message. Please hit me so someone will believe me, because it's not necessarily the physical aspect. It's the emotional, the internal, the mental, the spiritual.
Which can be much more damaging, unfortunately, for forever, for people. So these are some of the things that have to come along with the understanding of following or going, not following, going with your gut, and taking the risk, and finding the safe space, right? I mean, if there is a space where you do not feel safe to allow for you to go with your gut, then that should tell you something, right? And that should already be a red flag, a trigger that something is not okay, and it has to be made okay. If you cannot tell to your partner or to your friend or to whomever you feel you trust or you should have a healthy relationship with, you cannot tell this some of the intimate stuff that trigger you, that upset you, that make you joy, that excite you, then that's a problem.
If you value that relationship.
if you value the relationship, or sometimes if you're afraid for your safety, right? So then you wouldn't, there are sometimes, there was obviously situations where someone does not go away because of safety, right? They have nowhere
Right.
to go.
Yes, because, well, I would say it's still a form of relationship, though it's not a healthy, productive one when someone seeks to control you, to coerce you, to marginalize you, to abuse you in all the dimensions we talked about, the physical, the spiritual, the mental, the intellectual, all those things where you tell them or you say, get lost, they don't listen to you because they're living in their own world to then say in whatever way, I'm not going to put a diagnosis on that because that's not my role. And that's, though, of course, if I had somebody who was acting in a way that wasn't safe or unhealthy for me, I would have to make some kind of decision on what to do about that.
Right. Right. And at that point, if you have to go with your gut,
Yeah, absolutely.
because the feel that you get when someone is healthy for you, it's very different than the feel that you get when someone is unhealthy for you.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes it's not just about that person. Sometimes it's not just about you and how you feel. It really is just about that person's not being aligned in lots of elements, lots of things with you and your energy and your goals, your values, right? So that you change, right? I mean, if you can, ideally you take the risk and you change.
Yeah. Anyone in the audience want to make a comment or contribute a question or something?
Oh,
Go
look,
with your gut.
we passed the time. We passed the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I thank everyone for being here, and thank you, Greg, for always challenging
How are you
these
feeling though?
topics.
How are you feeling from the conversation? Like, what's your gut telling you now?
What's my gut telling you? Telling
Yeah.
me or telling you?
No, you. I don't hear your gut. You hear your gut.
I hear my gut. I think these are important topics because I really do think, going back to what I said, I verily believe that we are being taught to control versus nurture and nourish ourselves. And then we're being taught about a lot about communication, but we're not being taught about communication with self. So those should take a priority in order for us to understand why we're making certain decisions and why we're acting in a certain way. And then the other side of the coin is to allow the other person in front to or with you in a relationship to either stay or run. I most of my relationships when I went for dates, I wasn't swiping right or left or anything like that because those were not in existence at that time. But whenever I used to go on dates, I think I was very different than others. I really always put my cards on the table. Pretty much, this is who I am. This is what I am about. This is what I like. Sometimes I do silly stuff. I like the child inside of me, and that has to be allowed to play and to be obnoxious. And sometimes she's obnoxious, and that's okay. And if the other person stays, then that's fine. If the other person leaves, that's also fine, right? Because then I'm not trying to force something upon someone that it's not going to work, and that is really allowing for your gut to come out right there and then, and prioritizing self, but also allowing the other person to stay or go. So there's very different stories about dating, and maybe we can do another show about dating, because I think it's important, especially post separation and post divorce. I think dating is one of those sort of natural steps sometimes, that it comes with a lot of stuff that should be unpacked, I feel, and can be unpacked. But I'm not one to, maybe I used to be, to put an image, and lots of people do put their best image or the best foot forward or whatever the expression is. um but then that's not how we live our lives, right? That's not how our day-to-day life is going to be. So I'm not one to sort of make a whole thing that that I may just be for 3 times a year, right? So that's important, right? Because it's important to set my expectations and set the other person's expectations and create those boundaries that are healthy to me and healthy to the other person as well.
Yeah, I hear you want to be who you are, who you believe you are,
And I think all of us should be
all the time.
and should be permitted to. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So in the crowd, a last comment. Great topic. Thank you, Laura, for sharing your experiences and being vulnerable and giving us something to reflect on. And a happy face goes out to you.
Okay. Happy. Thank you. Thank you for staying actually over time.
Yeah.
And I, the vulnerable aspect of it, it does, it always feels that it makes me stronger. So
Yeah.
it really does. I think being vulnerable has always shown me that there's a lot of strength that comes with it.
It's a power tool.
It's a power tool without
yeah.
plugging it in. Yes. Yeah.
No, you don't have to plug it in. You plugged it into yourself. That's how you connected.
Okay.
All right. So thanks, Laura, for this, and
thank you, Greg.
we continue on. And, yeah. So thanks everyone for checking us out and listening, and we'll see you again soon.
Yes. See you next Sunday.
All right. Have a good one.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.